Hello everyone, welcome to PeopleSoft channel where we simplify PeopleSoft concepts in everyday language. My name is Samir and in this episode we are going to discuss these 7 PeopleCode events. In the previous episode we discussed the search events which are search init and search save. In this episode, we are going to discuss these set of 7 events which are row select, rebuild, field default, field formula, row init, post build, and activate. So, in today's episode, we will discuss a use case having multiple requirements, and to solve each requirement, we will discuss which of the 7 events we can use. In this way, we will be able to learn the behavior of the event. We will understand when the event can be used, and we will also write the people code for this event in order to complete the requirement. So, without further delay, let's start the discussion. For our requirement, we are going to use this employee component, and this has 4 pages such as employee page for the basic information, projects page for the project information, address page for the addresses, and salary page for the salary information of an employee. So let's have a look on the first requirement. An employee can have multiple types of address such as work address, current address, permanent address, etc. So our first requirement is that only human resource employees should be able to see all types of addresses of a given employee, whereas the employee which are from non-HR department, they should only be able to see the work address of an employee. Which means if we take a look at the address page, we can see that an employee is having multiple addresses here. The first one is the work address, second one is the permanent, and third one is the current address. So we have to design a logic such as only HR employee will be able to see all 3 addresses, whereas the non-HR employees should only be able to see the work address of an employee. To solve this requirement, which of the 7 events we can use? For this requirement, we can use the row select event. Let us understand how this event works and why we can use this event. So let's understand when row select event is executed in PeopleCode. So it is initiated at the beginning of the component build process. And why it is used? So row select PeopleCode is used to filter out the rows of data as they are being read into a component buffer. This is the reason why row select is useful to write PeopleCode for our requirement. Let's understand this with the help of a diagram. As you can see from the diagram, the address grid is getting multiple rows of data from the database where each row represents a type of address. Now, for our requirement, we need to apply some business logic in order to apply filter on these rows of data, such as if the employee is non-HR employee, only work address should be displayed. If he is an HR employee, then all types of addresses should be displayed. Hence, technically speaking, we need to apply the filter on the rows which are being returned from the database, and only the eligible rows should be displayed to the address grid. This is the reason we can use row select event in order to apply filter on the rows of data which are to be displayed on the address grid. Now, how can we apply the filter used in the row select event? So the 2 most commonly used functions are discard row and stop fetching. Discard row function can be used in case we have to observe each and every row and we have to make a decision whether to display this row into the grid or not. On the other hand, stop fetching function is used when we have to display the current row and discard all the other rows which are remaining. In this case, we will use discard row function. So let's see how we can complete the requirement. So let's open the component. Let's view the people code for this component. Let's select the record, which is employee address record, and let's write the business logic in row select event. This is the people code for our requirement, and we are using the discard row function in order to filter out the rows which are not meeting the criteria. Now let's test the effect of this people code. Now let's log in with the employee profile called HR1, which is an HR employee. Let's open the component. Let's see this employee. Let's go to address, and as you can see, being an HR employee, we are able to see all three addresses which are available for this employee, which is the work address, then we have a permanent address, and we have a current address for this employee. Now let's log out and log in with a profile which is a non-HR employee. Let's log in with VP1, which is a non-HR employee. Let's open the component and let's see the same employee information. If we go to address this time, we can only see one address for this employee, which is the work address. So being a non-HR employee, we can no longer view the permanent and current address of the employee. This is how we can leverage the row select event in order to filter out the rows of data based upon the business logic. Now let's move to the second requirement. For the second requirement, only HR users and vice president should be able to see the profile of VP1, which has an employee ID of 1. The other user should not have access to view VP1's profile, which means let's say that VP1 has an employee ID of 1. So now any employee can view this profile of VP1, which is having employee ID 1. But now we need to put a restriction here as a security feature that only VP1 and HR should be able to access the profile of employee ID 1, and other users should not have access to this employee profile. Now, which of these 7 events we can use to write the business logic? In this case, based upon the nature of the requirement, we can use the pre-built PeopleCode event. Let's understand how this event works, when it is fired, and why it can be used for our requirement. Pre-build event is initiated before the rest of the component build events execute. As you can see from this diagram, these are the 7 events which participates in the component build activities, and pre-build event is the second event in the sequence which is executed before the next 5 events for the component build process. This event is often used to hide or unhide the component pages. It is also used to set the component variables which can be used throughout the life cycle of a transaction in that component, and this event can also be used to validate the data entered in a search page. So here we can use this event to write the business logic. We can write the logic in such a way that if the operator which is logged in is not an HR employee or a VP1, if he is trying to view the profile of an employee ID 1, we should throw an error message and we should restrict the user from displaying the profile of a VP1. Alright, so let's write the people code for this event. Pre-build event is associated with a component. So let's open the component. Let's go to view people code. Let's select the component, and here we have pre-build event. Alright, so let's write the people code for our requirement. Alright, so this is the people code for our requirement. Only HR1 and VP1 employee should be able to see the profile of employee ID 1. Others should not have access. So let's test the effect of this people code. Now let's log in with VP1 to see if we can see the profile of employee ID 1, and we can see the profile as expected. Now let's see by logging in with HR1 profile. As expected, we can see the profile being an HR employee. Now let's logging in with VP2, and VP2 should not be able to see the profile of employee ID 1. Now let's see if we can see the profile of employee ID 1, and as expected, we cannot see the profile of employee ID 1. So this is how we have used the pre-build event in order to validate few things before the rest of the component build events are executed. And this is how we can use the pre-built PeopleCode event. Now let's move to the third requirement. For the third requirement, we need to set the default values to HRA and mobile allowances when a user enters a basic salary information for the new employee. Which means, let's say I'm trying to add a new employee, and if I go to salary page, I will provide the basic salary information, and based upon this basic salary, the HRA and mobile allowances should be calculated. The requirement is that HRA should be 10% of the basic salary and mobile allowances should be 2% of the basic salary. So, which of these 7 events we can use for our requirement? So, as you have guessed till now, we can use the field default PeopleCode event to write the business logic for our requirement. Let's see how field default works. So field default event is triggered when the pre-build event for the component has been executed successfully. As you can see from the diagram, if the pre-build event is completed successfully, then the field default event is triggered. However, if pre-build event has generated an error, in that case, field default event will not be executed. Now let's understand why field default event is used. This event is used in order to write the people code to programmatically set default values to page field. One thing to notice is that we can always specify the default values for a given record field. However, here our default value depends upon some other fields. For example, the default value for HRA depends upon the basic salary of an employee. Hence, we need to write the logic to calculate the HRA based upon the basic salary of an employee. Hence, we will use the field default event. So, let's write the people code for the requirement. So, let's open the component. Let's go to view people code and let's select the field for which we need to write the field default people code. So in the employee salary table, we will select the HRA and we will write the people code in the field default event. So this is the people code for setting the default value of HRA. Similarly, let's write people code for field default of mobile allowance. Alright, so let's test the effect of this people. Now let's try to add a new employee. Let's say we are trying to add employee ID 8. So let's go to a salary page and provide the basic salary as $10,000 and special allowances as $15,000. So as soon as we click on Save button, you can see that the HRA has been automatically calculated and mobile allowances has been calculated based upon the basic salary. So this is how we can use the field default event to programmatically set the default values for the page field. This event is often used in the scroll whenever you have to add a new row, so that each time you are trying to add a new row, you can programmatically set default values for the page fields. Alright, So let's move to the next requirement. We have a requirement that in the address page for non-HR users, we have to make the work address information as display only and non-deletable. Only those users which belongs to human resource department should be able to make changes to the work address of an employee, and only they should be able to delete the work address of an employee. On the other hand, non-HR employees should not have this access, which means, let's say I open the address information of an employee. Now I am a non-HR user. So for me, the work address here should be display only. Right now I can make any changes to this, but being a non-HR user, I should not have this access. Also, I can delete this row right now, delete the work address of an employee by doing this. However, as per the requirement, being a non-HR user, I should not have access to delete the work address of an employee. So, which of these 7 events we can use for our requirement? In this case, we can use the row init PeopleCode event. Let's understand how row init works. So, the row init event is initiated the first time the component processor encounters a row of a data. That means for each row which the component processor encounters, row init event will be executed. In our case, if an employee has 3 addresses, let's say work address, current address, and permanent address, then for all these 3 rows, row init event will be executed. It is used to set the initial state of component controls during the component build processing and row insert processing. Now we have a requirement that when the component encounters the address row, and if it is the work address of an employee, then we should make it display only and non-deletable. So let's write the people code for row init event. So let's go to the component. Let's see the people code. Select the component record for which we have to write the people code. In this case, it will be employee address table. And let's write the people code in row init event. So this is the people code for our requirement, and as per this people code, only HR employees would be able to edit and delete the work address of an employee, whereas the non-HR employees would not be able to edit or delete the work address of an employee. So let's test the functionality of this people code. So first, let's log in with the user HR1, which is an HR employee. Let's go to the employee component. Let's search for an employee, and if we go to address page, then being an HR employee, we are able to edit the address of an employee. For example, if I change the state of this employee, and if I click on save, I am able to make the changes. At the same time, I can delete the work address of an employee. Now let's sign out from this profile and sign in with a non-HR employee profile. So let's sign in with VP1, which is a non-HR profile. Let's open the same component. Now if we go to the address page, then we can see that for a non-HR employee, the work address is non-editable. All the fields are grayed out, and being a non-HR employee, we can no longer edit the information for the work address. Also, we can no longer delete the work address of an employee. However, if we go to the next address, then we can certainly make changes to this address, and we can also delete this address as this is not a work address. So this is how we can use the row init people code event. Alright, so let's move to the next requirement. Now we have a requirement that only HR employees should be able to see the salary page of an employee. On the other hand, we should hide the salary page for non-HR employees, which means let's say an employee is trying to view the information of this employee in this component, then if the viewer is an HR employee, only then he should be able to view the salary page. However, if the viewer is not an HR employee, in that case, the salary page should not be displayed to the user. In the other words, we should hide the salary page for non-HR employees. So, which of these 7 PeopleCode events we can use in order to hide the salary page based upon certain business logic? So in that case, we can use the post build event. So let's discuss about the post build PeopleCode event. So post build PeopleCode event is initiated after all the component build events have been initiated successfully. As you can see from this event flow diagram, when all the component building events from row select to row init has been executed successfully, after then the post build PeopleCode event is initiated. This event is often used to hide or unhide pages, which is similar to the pre-build event, and this event can also be used to set component variables, and so that these variables can be used throughout the transaction in that component. So as per our requirement, we can write the business logic, the conditional PeopleCode, in order to hide or unhide the salary page. So let's write PeopleCode for this requirement. Post build is a PeopleCode event associated with the component. So let's open the component, let's view the PeopleCode, and let's select the required component. As we select the component, we can select the post build event for this component. So let's write the business logic. So this is the PeopleCode for our requirement. Now let's test the effect of this PeopleCode. So let's sign in with HR1, which is an HR employee. Let's open the employee component. Let's see one of the employee, and as per our expectation, being an HR employee, we should be able to see the salary information of this employee. Alright, so now let's sign out from this profile and let's sign in from a non-HR employee profile. So let's sign in with VP1, which is a non-HR profile. Let's see this employee, and as you can see, being a non-HR employee, we no longer have access to view the salary information of this employee. In this way, we can use the post build event to hide or unhide pages based upon the business logic. Alright, so let's move to the next requirement. This requirement is specific to the salary page of this employee component. In this requirement, on the salary page, we have to make all the fields available and editable only for HR users. On the other hand, for non-HR users, we have to make the page display only so that they would not be able to edit anything. Also, we have to hide the 2 incentive fields. For example, this is the salary page, and if the user is an HR user who is opening this page, then he should be able to edit all the fields on this page. For example, if we provide the incentive %, then the program will calculate the incentive amount. This is valid for an HR user. For non-HR user, we have a requirement that these 2 incentive fields, which are incentive % and incentive amount, this should not be visible to the non-HR user. Also, all the fields on this salary page should be display only. So we have to make the entire page display only for a non-HR user. So which of these 7 PeopleCode events we can use in this case? As this requirement is specific to the salary page of the employee component, we can use the activate event. So let's discuss about the activate event. So activate event is a PeopleSoft page event, and it is the only PeopleCode event which is available for a PeopleSoft page. In this event flow diagram, we can see that when all the component build events right from row select to post build are completed, after that the activate event associated with a particular page is initiated. This event is initiated each time the page is activated or displayed to the user. For example, let us say that we have written a business logic in the page activate event for employee page. So each time this employee page will be displayed to the user, then the people code associated with the activate event will execute. Let us verify this by writing a simple win message for this employee page. This is the employee page. So we can go to view and we can click on view page people code. And as we discussed, for any PeopleSoft page, activate is the only people code event available. So whatever logic we need to write, we will write that business logic using PeopleSoft page activate event. So let us write a simple win message. Alright, so let's test the effect of this people code. So as we can see, the first page displayed to the user in this component is the employee page, and the people code in the activate event of this page has been fired. So let's say we move to some other page, and when we will come again to this employee page, the page activate event will be fired. So each time user returns to the page, the people code associated with that page will be triggered. This event is used to write the business logic which is associated with a particular page, and generally we write the people code or business logic which is related to the security validations when we have to hide or unhide specific fields on the page, or we have to hide or unhide scroll or grid area on that page. In that case, we can use the activate event. One important thing to notice is this activate event is available only for standard and secondary pages in PeopleSoft, and it is not available for a subpage. Alright, so let's write the people code for our requirement. So we will open the salary page. This is the salary page. Let's go to view people code and let's write the business logic for our requirement. This is the people code for our requirement. So let us test the effect of this people code. First, we will log in with HR1, which is an HR employee. So let us check employee information. And if we go to salary page, we can see that being an HR employee, all these fields on this page are editable. We can certainly make changes to this page field as expected. Now let us log in with VP1, which is a non-HR profile. So if we open the same employee and if we go to salary page, now you can see that the page is display only. We cannot edit any of the fields, and also the incentive fields are hidden from the user. In this way, we can use page activate event to provide the security validations. Generally, this event is used when you have to hide or unhide certain set of field or information from the PeopleSoft page. This is how the page activate event works. Now, in this episode, we are left with just one PeopleCode event, which is field formula event. So let's discuss these PeopleCode event. Field formula PeopleCode event is initiated once the field default event has been completed successfully, And this event is often used to store the function definitions so that we can use these function definitions elsewhere in some other people code. Let us see some of the examples of how field formula is used to store the function definition. Now let's see this funclip record. Funclip records are often used in people code in order to store the function definitions for some business logic, and these function definitions can be used in several other places. So let's open this funclip record. If we go to this people code display, then we can see that for all the fields in the field formula event, we have some people code written. So let us see people code for one of the field. Then we can see that for this field in the field formula event, there are multiple function definitions are present. For example, this is one of the function called getCFS, and this is the function definition for the same. Similarly, there are multiple function defined such as getUnCFS. Then we have hide unused CFS, etc. So oftentimes these people code field formula is used in order to write the function definition of some complicated business logic. Now let us say that we want to use this function getCFS in some other people code. Let us see how we can use this function which is already defined in the field formula of this field. So if we open the purchase order component, which is one of the PeopleSoft delivered component, then let's see the component people code for this component. And if we see this line, then this is the same function which has been declared in the funclip record which we just saw. So here, if we want to use that function, then we no longer need to redefine it. We just need to declare it, and we need to mention the address which is defined. For example, in this line, we are declaring the function which is of type people code, and we are also mentioning the target address, such as this function is present in this record, in this field, and this is the people code event in which the function definition for this function is present. This is how we can use the field formula event in order to store function definitions so that these can be used at multiple different places. That's it guys for this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this episode was helpful to you. So if you like the content, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel. In the next episode, we will discuss field edit and field change people code events, which are one of the most commonly used people code events to write business logic. So please stay tuned for the same.